Hello, scrappy friends. Iris here with another installment in the Make It a Double series that I do with my friend Crafty Meggie. We take one-page inspiration from Pinterest and make double-page layouts. This is our inspiration piece this month, and this is from Zsoka Marko. I hope I'm saying her name right. It was a fabulous layout, and honestly, I wanted to actually scrap lift it completely because I have those products that she used, but I decided to go ahead and change it up a bit. I'm going to keep somewhat of the same type of colorings, these bright colors, and this is a layout about one of my kids. So I'm scrapping my older daughter's first day of kindergarten. You can see here I have a few background options. I went with some ledger and grid and dots to start off with because this is about school. And I have a cut file that I designed myself. It is based on someone else's cut file, but she closed her shop and that was no longer available to me. So I decided to design one myself that was very similar. And I have a lot of old scrappy school products that I'm pulled out for this layout and a whole bunch of scraps. This here is from Creative Imaginations. I don't think they even exist anymore. That cut apart sheet. And the scraps, I don't know which ones they are because I don't have any of the branding strips anymore. I'm also pulling out some Ellie Studio products. I think they go very well with anything that's about younger kids because I think of bright colors. At this point, I just dumped a bunch of stuff on my desk and I'm just auditioning. Let's go ahead and fast forward a bit. I decided to use this Ellie Studio grid as my background because I want maximum contrast and I just couldn't resist that beautiful blue grid. The inspiration layout had 3 photos. They were a little bit smaller and they were placed kind of zigzag on either side of the cut file. I'm gonna do mine a little differently because I have 6 photos, but I don't want them all on one side and I didn't want to have any overlapping in the middle. I do that sometimes, but I didn't want it this time. So I'm going to grab one photo on the left of the cut file. That one really nestles nicely on that side because my daughter's looking towards the right, and the rest will go on the right side in a grid, but sort of a wonky grid. How fun is this paper? It's probably about 10 years old. Everything I use in this layout ranges from about a year old to about 10 years old. And to be honest, some of the older stuff does feel dated, but using it with a cut file always breathes new life into the older products and also mixing it with the newer. So I think that it's a really fun way to really get excited about some of that older stash. I've had some question about backing cut files, and sometimes I use my Silhouette Studio software. I'll use the offset function on a file to get an outline that's like within the outer borders. I'll throw a link right now up on the screen to one of the other process videos where I've done that and shown you in the Silhouette software. But this was a really complex one, so it was a lot easier to go old school and low tech. Use the cut file itself, either around the outer border of each letter, or in some cases, because these are welded together, the negative portion that's within the outline, I'll put it on there and trace around it loosely with a pencil and then cut it out. All right, let's just fast forward because you don't need to see me line this whole thing. Ta-da! All my letters are backed and I've put everything roughly in the same place they're going to go. I'm going to try a few things and shuffle around the grid. And I'm also going to start on the bottom border. Oh, I have a gap there and that was done on purpose so I could decorate within the cut file itself. And the kindergarten cut apart is really bright. That's what I'm pointing out there. The 2 yellows already on the page aren't as bright. So the kindergarten's not going to make it in, unfortunately. But that's okay. I have still more kindergarten pages to make. So for the border, I'm not quite sure what this green paper is from, But the one here that's the colorful pencils, I believe that's a Studio Calico, and you see that I went off camera and I cut off the top of that paper. I was thinking it'd be really cool on this layout with the pencils. And then I realized that's really tall. And I already cut off most of it. I was just using the very tops of the pencils. And it's just going to take up too much space. So I cut this green paper a little bit smaller, shorter, and to see if also with the layering, the pencils would get lost behind some of the other papers. So that's not going to work, unfortunately. Now I know that I had a call on my phone and it stopped recording for a while. So we're going to fast forward again. When I got back, I did a whole bunch of stuff to the cut file. So let me show you. The back is completely covered with some foam. Like many crafters, I'll buy those sheets of foam and I'll use them to cut bigger pieces to back when you want to add dimension. And in this case, I'd already die cut a whole bunch of stuff out of these sheets. So I have these partials and they have all weird cutouts out of them. I decided to use that. Let me tell you, that was a long process. And then I also stitched the LMNOP, which is in cursive. I wanted to stitch the and as well, but that took so long that I just said, no, there's no way. And besides, the elemental P was the more important part. So what I used was a variegated rainbow thread. I needed to double it up, and they didn't line up very easily. When you put it through the needle and it doubles up. So I had to work at like figuring out where the pieces lined up and tying together, and then I'd run out really quick. And anyway, long story short, I spent a lot of time on this cut file. The longest I have ever spent. But it's done and I really love the way it looks. What I would do next time differently is to maybe do less foam, like not try to line the whole thing. Use individual threads that I could just do like each letter with the individual color. And also I would cut my cut file out with my normal preferred cardstock, which is 120 pounds. This one I used is only, I think, 80, and it was just too flimsy. All right, then the border. My original idea was to sort of have it with waves of alternating, and it just was going to look too messy. You can see here, it's just too much of a variation. I'm like, okay, let me think about this. I put some adhesive on my photos. I have a grid background and it's nice for lining up things, but I don't want my grid design to be too blocky. So I'll be changing this up a little bit later. As I'm still thinking about the border, I decide to bring out the embellishments because that might affect what I do with the border. I still wanted to try that kindergarten cut apart, but it's just not going to work, is it? And I moved the cut file a little bit over. I pulled out some wood veneer. In the photos, there are some desktops that are wood colored, and there's some tan paint. So I thought some wood veneer would be a nice complement and contrast with all the colors that are there, tone things down a little. This set right here is from Color Cast Designs, the School Days. Just put it away, but you saw me take out the circles that say kindergarten in the backpack. I don't think she has those in the shop at the moment. Hopefully she'll bring them back, but it's really fun because they have all the school years. And I pulled out some LE Studio wood veneer and cork shapes. I also pulled out this drawer of some random acrylic shapes, and then I spilled it all. So let's fast forward away from that. I just had one thing after another happen with this layout. There was one point I was wondering if I'd ever finish it. And then Maggie and I couldn't get our schedules synchronized and get our shit together enough to actually finish and post last month. So we gave up on June and you get this in July instead. Back to the border, I had it off the side of the page, so I cut off the extra. And now I'm piecing together. I decided to have that whole stripe across the middle at the foreground or the forefront, and then the other colors behind it, one spanning across the two sides of the layout and the black pieces at the two ends. This gives the whole border more symmetry and order. I'm going to fast forward again. Time to spruce up the grid. I'm going to bring some of the papers and the border upwards to decorate and mat the photos. In some cases, I use little strips. For instance, in this photo, I'm cutting apart little leftover strip of the stripe paper, and I'm going to put it on the top and bottom. And I'll add a tab, although this is not the one that's going to stay there ultimately. I pull out more of the cork, adding the My Fave speech bubble in that spot that is sort of just blank space. And like I said, this grid is going to be wonky and it has things overlapping in different areas. That top middle photo has a lot of white space, so I want to cover some of that up. And I tried a few different things. Ultimately, I decide to add another cork speech bubble. And I love that it says "what" with the question mark and exclamation mark, because one, I do that all the time. And two, the expression on my daughter's face. She's smiling, but you can see she's just not as happy as you'd think because she's all nervous. I remembered that ultimately I wanted to use some really old product. I don't know who these are from, but I have the little ABC banner. It might be Jolie's, and the little crayons. So the banner are a little fabric and like a thick twine. The crayons are plastic pieces with paper on top. I pulled a bunch of enamel shapes thinking that I could decorate in the background. The only space I really have though is in the middle under the ABC, and I was at this point thinking I want to do some journaling. That's probably the only spot to put them in. And I quickly came to the conclusion that putting stuff on the background wasn't going to fit the feel that I wanted for this layout. I thought it would be really messy. So I'm going to stick to adding things along edges and corners of the photos. Still hadn't added any matting to the top photos, and it was necessary to do that to tie in with the different variations in the cut file and the border at the bottom, instead of just having the photos directly on the background. Some layouts come together where you do it in layers, so you would maybe mat all the photos. In this one, I actually was working out what I wanted to mat with as I went through the ephemera. In the interest of shortening the video, I'm going to fast forward through most of the rest of the embellishing. As you can see, I just played with the layers and used scraps, so some of them aren't even all the way around the photo. Some have multiple scraps behind it. I used a couple old chipboard photo corners on a couple photos, did a cluster at the top right, another cluster that's very different on the bottom right. I have a visual triangle of tags. I also added a couple more things onto the cut file itself, like the rubber arrow that has the stars on top of the V and the little acrylic star on the Q. And to add to the funky wonkiness, I'm writing my journaling directly on the background between two photos under the banner. And it says, "First day of kindergarten." Yep, you were nervous. The chaos of drop-off, all the kids and parents and tag-along siblings was a bit overwhelming. But you got so excited when you met Charlie, the class guinea pig. At pickup time, you couldn't stop talking about Miss Kennedy. She's still one of your all-time favorite teachers. It helped to write it out in pencil first, and that I had nice lines. So I felt like this time it wasn't too messy. And now I add my date onto one of the Ellie Studio tags or tabs, and it's just a little round spot for the date. And I'm putting this on the left-hand side. You notice this photo isn't lined up. It's a little bit off kilter on a diagonal. Just to add more interest, I added another wood veneer across that H. And here I'm going to put a little cluster with an enamel dot and a couple of staples here and there because I just love using those little tiny staples on things. And that'll do it for this layout. I've got still photos coming up. Thanks for joining me for another Make It a Double layout. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think about this series and if you're enjoying it. I think it's a lot of fun to take the inspiration from Pinterest. We have a lot of one-pagers and get some fresh two-pagers out of it. I've got the link down below for Maggie's video so you can see her double page take on the one-page inspiration layout. I've also left links to some of the supplies I used. And if you're not a subscriber, you should hit that subscribe button and the little bell to be notified the next time we have one of these double page layouts coming out. Thanks again, and I will see you here next time.